Hey, I'm Michael Guido, the CEO of Structure.co, and I'm excited to bring this edition of our Builder series to you. Measure twice, cut once. This is the story of Joseph Strauss, the driving force behind the Golden Gate Bridge and over 400 structures across the world. Now, the Golden Gate is truly an iconic symbol of engineering and innovation and is one of the most photographed landmarks in the world. There's lots we can learn from Strauss, and I hope you enjoy this story for its underdog protagonists, the flair for the dramatic, and some of the amazing anecdotes.
How does a child from an artistic family with no engineering background develop into the man who built one of the most iconic bridges in the world? Joseph Baumann Strauss was born on January 9, 1870, in Cincinnati, Ohio. His father, Raphael Strauss, was a painter and a writer. His mother was a concert pianist. He was the youngest of 4 children, raised in a household full of art, music, and literature. Growing up, Joseph wanted to follow in his parents' footsteps and pursue a career in the arts. Engineering was never the plan. This is the story of Joseph Strauss, the visionary behind the Golden Gate Bridge. Throughout his life, Strauss felt overlooked, dismissed, and underestimated. This could have been a legitimate error related to his stature. He was only 5 feet 3 inches tall. According to history, Strauss was sent to the infirmary to recover after trying out for the football team at the University of Cincinnati. As he recovered, young Joseph studied the John A. Roebling suspension bridge spanning the Ohio River. Roebling himself wrote of it.
This bridge, when constructed, will possess great claims as a national monument, as a splendid work of art, and as a remarkable specimen of the modern engineering and construction. It will stand unrivaled upon the continent. Its gigantic features will speak loudly in favor of the energy and enterprise of its possession.
At the time, it had been the longest bridge in the world. Strauss must have stared at it for days. He abandoned his dream of becoming an artist and committed entirely to bridges. He graduated in 1892 with a degree in civil engineering. After graduating, he worked briefly as a craftsman at the New Jersey Steel and Iron Company, then taught for a short period back at the University of Cincinnati, and eventually made his way to Chicago, a city that was rebuilding after the Great Fire and needed bridges everywhere. In Chicago, Joseph joined the firm of Ralph Majeski, one of the leading bridge designers in the country. This was his real education. Strauss learned how large-scale bridge projects were actually executed. The funding, the politics, the engineering, the materials. Almost immediately, he spotted something nobody else had bothered to address. Bascule bridges at the time used expensive iron counterweights. A bascule bridge is a movable bridge that pivots upwards on a horizontal hinge to allow maritime traffic to pass. It uses a counterweight system, like a seesaw, to balance the deck during operation. Tower Bridge in London is a famous example, built between 1886 and 1894. Strauss proposed switching to cheaper concrete counterweights instead. It was a simple idea, and in hindsight an obvious one, that would save enormous amounts of money. His superiors rejected it without serious consideration. Strauss did what he would do multiple times throughout the rest of his life when faced with a no. He took on the challenge and he bet on himself. In the early 1900s, Strauss started his own firm, the Strauss Bascule Bridge Company of Chicago. He built his concrete counterweight designed bridges, proved they worked, patented the design, and watched as his innovation spread across the industry. His designs were eventually replicated in Norway, Sweden, France, and beyond. Over the following decades, Strauss built over 400 bridges across the United States and around the world, from Portland to Toronto to the Soviet Union. He became one of the most prolific bridge engineers in history. He wanted to build, in his own words, the biggest thing of its kind that a man could build. That thing was a bridge over the Golden Gate, the narrow, turbulent strait where the San Francisco Bay meets the Pacific Ocean. The name has a history. In 1846, U.S. Army Captain John C. Fremont named the strait the Golden Gate because its opening reminded him of the harbor in Istanbul, the Golden Horn. Today, the Golden Gate is a global synonym for San Francisco and for engineering marvels. The idea had been floated for years, but nobody believed it could actually be done. The currents were brutal, the winds were fierce, the water was deep, and the span required was longer than anything that had ever been built. In 1916, a San Francisco city engineer published an article in a newspaper stating that such a bridge could not be built for less than $100 million. Strauss saw the paper and responded publicly that he could build it for $17 million. It was a bold, almost reckless claim. It got people's attention. What followed was one of the longest, most exhausting campaigns in the history of American engineering. For over a decade through the 1920s, Strauss fought for this bridge against seemingly everyone. Ferry companies fought him because a bridge would destroy their business. The US Navy protested that a collapsed bridge could block the bay. Environmentalists fought him. City administrators fought him. Fellow engineers publicly questioned whether it was even structurally possible. Strauss absorbed every attack, answered every objection. He gave speeches, he wrote proposals, he lobbied politicians. He refused to stop. He later said that it took 2 decades and 200 million words to convince people the bridge was feasible. Finally, in November 1930, in the midst of the Great Depression, when the entire country was struggling, voters passed a bond measure to fund the project. Strauss was named chief engineer. He had worked, waited, and refined his idea for over 12 years for this moment. But here's where the story gets complicated. To handle the complex structural designs of a bridge this size, Strauss hired Charles Alton Ellis back in 1922. Ellis was a professor of civil engineering at the University of Illinois and one of the most gifted structural engineers of his generation. When the Golden Gate project got serious, it was Ellis who spent years working through the intricate mathematical calculations that made the bridge constructible. The preliminary plans, the suspension design, the structural framework. Ellis was the engineering brain behind it. Most people who worked on the project at the time knew. Strauss knew it too. In November of 1931, as the bridge was gaining momentum and Ellis's role was becoming impossible to ignore, Strauss told Ellis to take a vacation, transferred all his calculations and drawings to another engineer, and effectively fired him. Ellis was never brought back. When the Golden Gate Bridge opened in 1937, Charles Alton Ellis received no credit whatsoever. His name appeared nowhere. It would take 75 years until 2012 for a plaque honoring Ellis to finally be installed on the south tower of the bridge. Construction officially began in January of 1933. Strauss was on site for nearly the entire 4-year build, overseeing every major decision. He made one demand early on that was considered unusual at the time. He required a large safety net to be suspended beneath the bridge throughout construction. In that era, worker deaths on major projects were simply accepted as part of the cost of building. Strauss refused to accept it. That net saved the lives of 19 workers, who fell during construction. Midway through the build, Strauss's personal life fell apart. He disappeared from the project for over 6 months. Rumors spread that he had suffered a complete nervous breakdown. During that period, away from public view, he divorced his longtime wife and married Annette, a young singer many years his junior. He came back to the project, changed, quieter, more withdrawn, but determined to see it through. On May 27, 1937, the Golden Gate Bridge opened to the public. The iconic structure was constructed for $35 million, roughly $666 million in today's money. Strauss, true to his identity as both engineer and poet, wrote a poem for the occasion. He called it "The Mighty Task Is Done." It was the last great thing he would do. The project had taken everything out of him. His health deteriorated rapidly after the bridge opened. Less than a year later, on May 16, 1938, Joseph Bauman Strauss died in Los Angeles. He was 68 years old. His widow Annette used her own money to fund a bronze statue of him, which was installed at the San Francisco side of the bridge in 1941. She had it inscribed with 4 words: "The man who built the bridge." Whether that inscription is fully accurate is something historians still debate. Charles Ellis's contributions were real, and they were buried for decades. Today, 112,000 vehicles cross the Golden Gate Bridge every single day. It generates hundreds of millions of dollars in tolls every year. It is the most photographed bridge in the world, and it was built by a 5'3" kid from Cincinnati, who looked out a hospital window one afternoon and decided that if the world wasn't going to make room for him, he was going to build something so large it had no choice.
Thanks for watching, and learn more at structure.co, built for builders.